Yo, what up everybody, it's Tuna. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the new season of Torchlight Infinite. It's looking pretty crazy. This ARPG just keeps honestly getting better and better. There's a lot of new changes coming to the season, and honestly, they always sort of exceed expectations with the amount of changes and the amount of things that they actually put into the game. It seems like to me like every season, they're really trying to improve upon and make the game more fun and more engaging, going through all the crafting elements as well as the gameplay elements, and really not going shy on adding a little bit of craziness into their game. Now, obviously, that loot explosion is probably what you'd be expecting if you had like not so strict loot filter, but it's looking pretty wild. So like the league mechanic is you're just running through maps, you're fighting these gears, and as you're killing monsters, you're just getting a bunch of rewards, which you can see on the right side of the screen, and the timer will be ticking down. But as you kill more monsters inside of the maps, the timer will sort of like go up, and you'll just gain more and more and more of these reward tiles. And these reward tiles then are going to be claimable through this mechanic here. And you see this very this very nice lady over here, which is the Clockwork Ballet, essentially. And you'll get like extra bonuses and extra multipliers to the loot depending on a certain condition that you'll have to meet as you're killing monsters or that kind of stuff, right? And overall, then you end up killing a bunch of monsters that drop a ton of loot when you claim the loot here at the end. And that's this like crazy loot explosion that you're seeing. But yeah, it seems pretty simple. It's a very simple mechanic in that you're just going through your maps, you're killing monsters, and as you're killing monsters, you get these reward tiles. The faster you can kill them, the more reward tiles you get, and then you're going to have multipliers that you get through the mechanic itself, as well as what you just saw there, additional passives that you can slot into a independent tree. And this independent tree is going to be the meta progression for the season, as they always do. They have these like meta progression sort of trees that allow you to progress through it, as the name would suggest. But essentially what that does is you'll be able to sort of pick your optimal path as you're getting points, and then eventually at some point you'll be able to put all those points into literally every passive in there, so that you get the benefits of every one of these passives. But it's a nice little thing that they do to sort of give you a little bit of a choice early on what you'd like to focus on. Usually it's either like going for more of a specific reward type or more multipliers to global quantity or that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's the basics of the season mechanic itself, the Clockwork Ballet. But another really nice thing that stood out to me about the season mechanic, if I can find it here, is that you'll be actually able to encounter the boss through just your normal day-to-day sort of like mapping, right? So yeah, you'll be just going through your maps, and then eventually a portal will pop up, as you can see here. Go to the Iron Curtain of Eminence, and you'll walk in and you will just be fighting this new boss. And this new boss, obviously, I'm pretty sure is going to be scaling as the time marks are scaling. And I'm not 100% sure just yet, but there might be invitations for it later to scale into, higher and more difficult variants of the boss itself, as they usually do have that, the uber variants of the bosses. But overall, I think it's a really nice change that they're adding the boss itself as part of killing mechanic, because in the past I feel like a lot of people felt like selling the keys to access the bosses was a more viable option for them, as they would generally be very expensive and people like to gamble on them. So this way you'll be able to actually do the content and just not worry about it too much, right? But do remember that we now actually have co-op, right? So if you have a friend that actually has a build that can destroy bosses, but your build might not be able to do that, then you can always kind of invite people in to kill the boss. As you saw earlier, it's just going to be dropping a portal, so you'll have time to actually get your friends in if you need to do that. So yeah, that's another thing, is that the co-op is now completely out of beta, so you'll be able to actually play with friends and invite them, and it's actually quite seamless. And it's really good, and I do suggest that if you do have friends that are interested in playing the game, try to get them to play with you. It's really nice once you get into maps. And yep, that about sums up all there is to know about the season mechanic. It's a quick little TLDR, but there is actually just so much more that I wanted to talk about. So we do have a new hero, and it's basically just an edgy version of Carino, right? So it's like he's got this heat up and this cooldown mechanic. Essentially, as you're standing still, you're cooling down, and as you're moving, you're gonna be heating up. So you shoot and you heat up, but then when your character moves around and you stop shooting and stuff, like, you're going to be cooling down. And the trick with him is that you're getting multiplicative increases as you like with the heat, but you are getting speed increases with the cooldown. So you're going to sort of try to balance the heat as well as the cooling. And in endgame variants of the build, essentially, I reckon you'll want to be getting as much of that heat as possible and retain that heat. But the champion itself seems to be more leaning towards the playstyle of you know, shooting while moving so that you can retain the heat as well as, you know, gain the benefits of the more multipliers that you're getting from the heat itself, as that seems like a lot of the damage is going to be coming from that. So essentially, you know, any kind of build that can actually shoot and run and do all that kind of stuff is something that it's going to be more geared towards, and something that I would think I would play. But as you can see here, the playstyle is, you know, he's going to just be like standing still and turreting. But I suspect that people are going to be making either activation mediums or things like Ring of Blades in order to gain benefit of that heating up mechanic that is, you know, part of its a part of its kit. Now, it wouldn't be a new season of Torchlight Infinite if it didn't have new legendaries, right? So there's going to be a bunch of new legendaries you can see here. So Heal of Hands is a bit of a weird one, but you're just triggering while standing still, and then you're triggering Blurry while moving. So yeah, it's going to be like different conditions whether you're standing still or moving, and that's going to be a very nice one for leveling. But this ring here seems pretty damn crazy, because it's sort of like one of those rings or one of those type of items that has variable modifiers on there, and you can see that some of these can be quite insane. So you'll get like additional cooldown recovery, but you'll get negative ailment duration, but you'll get additional damage for each type of ailment, or crowd control inflicted recently. So that's going to be like a multiplicative increase. And it's nice that they're actually putting these brackets as well to tell you that it's now a multiplicative. But we all know that, like, if you've been playing Torchlight for a while, that if something says additional, it's going to be multiplicative, right? So these rings have the potential to be actually pretty damn insane. And I'm really looking forward to them, because yeah, they're just going to have like a bunch of different stats that will roll with them. You know, they're not only going to have these two types of them, but it's kind of going to be like, if you play Path of Exile, like Watcher's Eyes, where you'll get like random stats on them. And some of them look to be pretty damn insane. So yeah, definitely look forward to these rings and look out for their stats. You know, once the patch drops, maybe open the auction house, check out all of the stats that they have, and, you know, search for something that might actually be useful for your build, because I feel like this is one of those items that might start out to be a little bit cheaper and will get more and more expensive over time as people realize just how insane it is, and as people realize that their corruptions will then become, you know, it will just be like wild, basically, right? You see 30% skill effect duration there on that one is pretty damn insane. So yeah, this will be very good for type repurification kind of builds and that sort of stuff, since the negatives are not going to be really affecting you. But the negative cooldown recovery speed, you know, if you do corrode that and that ends up being not quite so much, right? Because like negative 80% is a lot, then that might be pretty good for a certain amount of builds. So the patch notes almost just dropped, and the thing about them is that there is so many changes, so I can't really go through everything, but I just wanted to highlight some of the sort of winners and the losers with the patch notes, and in regards to hero traits specifically. So I would say that Cat Eye Erica Lightning Shadow, unfortunately, you know, she was completely busted last season, but this season she received a substantial amount of nerfs. And now these nerfs are actually quite big in some situations. So like, you'll be getting a lot less multipliers in your final few traits. And overall, you know, if you've played her in the previous season, she's practically going to be the same, but she will have, you know, much less damage, in that you won't be able to dummy cap quite as easily, and it'll just be much more expensive. However, because of the fact that she won't be quite as popular, maybe her gear will be cheaper, meaning you'll still be able to easily get the damage that you want from her. But overall, Cat Eye Erica has received probably the biggest nerfs of the patch. Now, Oracle, Wisdom of Gods, as well as Incarnation of Gods have received a little bit of buffs, but I feel like in the current meta, they are still quite tricky. And overall, I feel like charges themselves, unless they have completely reworked the beacon rolls that you can get on there. There are a lot of downsides to do with charges, and I generally think that playing charge builds can be quite frustrating because of that, so I tend to stay away from them for that reason. However, I know that once you get them to absolute min max, and in some situations where people like the snapshot and that sort of stuff, they can be quite good. But I personally would not go for one of those. Now, Commander Moto looks to be kind of busted, actually. He looks to be very, very strong. They reworked him a little bit, and I think he is probably the most strongest hero trait coming into the new season, and also one of the easiest, as he will be able to do a crazy amount of single target damage right off the bat, and it'll be quite easy for him to do that. So yeah, if you're just looking for like an easy way to scale into endgame, I think Commander Moto Order Calling is going to be like Commander Moto is going to be like the good trait to go for. So yeah, ideally, you'll be sort of like reading through these because the changes are pretty big, but Charge Calling is where it received the most changes, and yeah, where it receives the most buffs as well. So yeah, Charge Calling is going to be pretty insane, and if you were on the fence of like playing a character, this is a pretty good one. And honestly, in Torchlight Infinite, minions are quite good. Like, they're actually not bad at all. They're not like clunky in any sort of way, and they will just be charging and stuff. And yeah, overall, it's gonna be a very strong one. Now, Frostfire, Gemma, Ice Infusion, she got a little bit of buffs, but overall, it's about the same. It's Ice, Fire, Fusion, Gemma, and she's just gonna be really strong, yeah. Frostbitten Heart is about the same as well. Now, she did get a little bit of a nerf here, but a little bit of a buff here. So it's kind of like, these changes are not very substantial, as they will just basically mean that you'll have a little bit more ramp, and you'll need to be keeping up that ramp a little bit faster. But then you're also getting a little bit of a nerf here, as monsters will take 10% less cold damage taken. However, Flame of Pleasure is looking to be potentially really strong. Now this Gemma 3 Flame of Pleasure is really hard to start. It's a really kind of like tricky hero to start, but she can scale really well later on. It seems like China is very convinced that Firebird, Firebird, Flame of Pleasure, Gemma is just going to be very strong. And I do not know currently the exact numbers for that, but it's definitely something to keep an eye out for in case you wanted to play Flame of Pleasure. She's gotten a big amount of buffs, and she might actually be probably one of the strongest this season. Now, Ranger of Glory is pretty good, and it got some buffs again. It's kind of one of those, like, in my opinion, very underrated type of heroes. Like Divine Shot Karina, Range of Glory is just going to be very strong, and it's going to also scale really well later on. And now you also have an activation medium for a spell burst, so you'll be able to like use that for your endgame builds with Range of Glory, which is actually kind of cool. Now, Spacetime Elapse, I think it's like still very strong, and if you ever want to be like, there's not really many substantial changes that we're getting to this hero here, so there's not really that much to say overall. However, Berserker Rahan, in my opinion, is probably the second biggest winner of the patch notes, as you are now able to scale your damage with both your attributes as well as your gem levels. So the burst is the main thing that got buffed. So if you have in the past played Rage Burst and that kind of stuff, the Rahan is going to be kind of like much more stronger. So as you can see here, the burst itself now will gain 12% more damage per +1 skill level. So since this is going to be tagged as both a physical as well as a global attack type of skill, you'll be able to benefit from having plus the physical skill levels as well as plus to global skill levels, and you'll be able to stack those, and you'll have also additionally 3 on your passive skills, and you'll just get a bunch of them on your slates too. And I believe you can also get one on Candle. So yeah, this here is going to be giving you 12% multiplicative damage per skill level, and which is not something that we previously had, as it was just basically the damage you get is what you get. But on top of that, you'll also be getting 1% additional burst damage for for each level, for each additional 1% burst, for each level additional 2% burst damage. So like, you'll just be getting a bunch of additional burst damage as you level up, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, the more you level up, the more you'll scale. And finally, for each additional attribute, you'll be getting, I think it's like 0.5% more damage per point in strength or dexterity. So you'll be able to scale your damage to some pretty good levels. Now, Train is a build that a lot of you guys probably have played in the past, and it's now just going to be much stronger because of these changes. So actually, I feel like it's one of those builds that was kind of falling off in the past, but I think this season it's going to see a big boost to it, as it's like really easy to start it. You're going to be getting a ton of damage just from leveling up, as well as getting some of your main attributes. And on top of that, then you'll also additionally be able to scale with gem levels, which is not something that you could do in the past. So yeah, Rehan is going to be insane. So the Rehan, potentially even what I'm going to be starting. So I look forward to that. Now, Rosa got a whole bunch of changes, and I'm afraid to say that unfortunately I have never played Rosa, so I wouldn't be able to tell you whether she's that insane. But you know, my friend Palstron is actually really convinced that she's strong. So if anything, if you guys want to know more about Lightbringer Rosa, maybe check out Palstron's content or what he's getting up to, because he's potentially starting that. But from what I understand is that she's just very tanky and can dish out damage. And so yeah, what else do you want? But there is so many changes that they made to her this season. It looks like they just really want to put her in a place where she fits into the meta. And usually when I think the Torchlight Infinite developers do that kind of stuff, when they set out to situate a character, like a trait, into the meta, they actually succeed in doing that. So they're actually like pretty competent in doing so. So yeah, that is the basic meta rundown of the traits, and overall what I think is going to be the best one. But man, there is actually so much more to the season. So for example, now they are adding a new way to brand your Divinity slates, and these Divinity slates are going to be branded kind of like you would just basically like spam them, but it's not permanent anymore. You can wipe them, you can restore your slates and keep branding them. And you're going to be having this brand currency that you can see on the right there. And you're just going to be chucking that onto your Divinity slates, getting them to the perfect level that you want them. And overall, there's like a bunch of quality of life changes too that you'll have. And, you know, so since you'll be able to mass bulk buy them from the Divinity code, like basically the shop itself. And yeah, so you'll be able to like wipe them as well as rewrite them much more easily. And I really hope that you'll also be able to sell them. So people will hopefully be able to sell already branded slates, although I am not 100% sure about that. But that is a very nice change that they're adding to the season. But that is only a small change that they're adding, because they're actually reworking legendaries as well as crafting overall, like for the 5th time. But that's like one of the things that I think is really cool about the Torchlight Infinite devs. I know it's like actually kind of hard to keep up with all the changes that they do every season, but I do really appreciate the fact that they keep trying until they find something that is really sitting where they'd like it to sit. And in this situation, they were kind of like a little bit sad to see that everybody was just kidding themselves out in legendaries, and that was just going to be a thing that people would do. So they decided to go about making legendaries craftable, but retaining their legendary modifiers. So if, for example, a weapon had 2 legendary modifiers, which really stood out and is the reason why, or you know, why this was a legendary, now it will retain those 2 legendary modifiers, as you can see here. Like for example, with Supreme Throne, you'll gain 2 stacks of Throne, as well as 20% chance to lose 1 stack of Throne on non-critical strike. But then you'll be able to craft 3 additional affixes. So that's like 3 additional affixes, which are basically prefix or suffix agnostic. So you'll be able to have like whichever one that you want on there. As you can see, like additional damage was actually a prefix, and damage and cast speed was suffixes. But yeah, so you'll just be able to get like additional affixes on your legendaries and craft them accordingly. And it looked like a lot of these would get really expensive the more you craft them, and you could also like upgrade the tiers and that kind of stuff. But I think it's kind of a nice touch. I'm not 100% sure how this is gonna end up working out, but you can see like the weapon that he's using here is just absolutely insane, right? So he's got like 45% gear attack speed, which is a T0, and then you have another T0, 50 to 1900 lightning damage to attacks when having at least 1200 dexterity, and then T1 dexterity, right? And it's on a circular clearing. That is absolutely insane. You're going to be seeing all kinds of new builds that people are running this season because of this. And then on top of that, what's going to be really interesting is potentially corroding these two. So there is going to be a lot of interesting and new combination of items. And it's not going to be also quite as simple as telling people like, oh, you need this legendary, but you're also going to need the legendary crafted on top of that. So I guess the easiest parallel I can draw for this is kind of like Last Epoch, you know, how it has like legendary potential, but it's kind of like that, but inversed. So it's like reverse legendary potential in a way. So that's pretty crazy. And yeah, as you can see, like you can upgrade your affixes to T0, but they will consume all remaining plasticity. So they will also have plasticity, as you can see from some of these tooltips. So that's going to be quite interesting, right? You have like legendaries with plasticity, and then you'll be crafting them additionally. But that leaves me to wonder kind of like, where do rare items still fit in? And of course, rare items are going to have more affixes than legendary items. But legendary items in most situations, I feel like, are just going to be what you'll be equipping on your endgame character. And I suspect to see like everybody kitted out in legendaries. Now that's a little bit weird to me, but I think it's like, it's cool to see that sort of stuff, as I feel like Torchlight Infinite devs, they just kind of want to experiment with these sort of things, see how they work, and then keep the things that they like and maybe skip the things that they don't like, and then next season we might get something else. But that's kind of what makes this game really interesting, is that like it really tends to change a lot over time. Yeah, honestly, like this game is like pretty phenomenal because of that. Like they get a lot done in three months. Now I've always held GG to a very, like, I've always thought of them as like, how did they get this much content done in 3 months? But it seems to be like the Torchlight Infinite devs are also at that stage of being able to just churn out and make good fun content every 3 months. I really look forward to playing around with all the changes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that is a very nice change that we're getting to legendaries. Now there's a bunch more stuff that they've changed, as you'd expect, like the corrosion system, giving you some sort of like inheritance system that I didn't fully understand yet. But this is the biggest change of them all. They are changing the Netherrealm entirely. There is no more trade cards at all. As opposed to having trade cards, what they're doing now is they're adding skill trees for each independent mechanic that you can see here. You can open up this, for example, is going to be the legendary gear skill tree, whereas this is going to be like rare monsters in quantity. This is the city of Eterna, and this is the cube, for example. So you will be able to set up your kind of like build. So it's like basically like your Atlas passive skill tree, and then you'll be speccing into each individual talent that you want to have, and each of us is going to be having a specific kind of Netherrealm build, and it's going to be, you know, changing the way that we play the Netherrealm and the way that we scale loot in the Netherrealm itself, and which mechanics are going to be good for us. Now there's a lot of things here to take in, and a lot of these passives are still not known, of course, but like you can check them all out in the patch notes. I'm not going to go through all of them, as there is just like so many to look through, but it's really nice because yeah, you'll just be basically like having a specific build, and on top of having a specific build, you'll be able to share your specific build with other people. So you'll be able to go and find a quick build, or you'll be able to share your build with your friends, which essentially, like, you can also just probably steal it from a streamer or something like that, you know, ask them to share it with you. There'll be builds for time mark 7, time mark 8, and all that kind of stuff. Now I'm not really exactly sure how many passives you're going to be getting, but this seems like a really cool system overall, and you can see that you'll probably be able to go pretty crazy on that. Now the profound talent constellation might be pretty interesting too. So, and you'll also be getting a Clockwork Ballet talent too, so that'll be specific to the season mechanic as well. So that's like actually pretty cool to have that on there, because I don't think in the past we've ever been able to scale the season mechanic itself during the season. So this is gonna be the first time that we'll be able to like actually enhance the amount of loot that we get from the season mechanic through something like this. And on top of that, like you can see here at the bottom how it says plan 1, you'll be able to switch between the plans, meaning you know, you'll be able to have like multiple builds depending on what you want to do. So like if you want to be farming time mark 7 for a while and just blast bosses, go boss rushing or something like that, you can go for your boss rush tree. But if you then want to go into time mark 8 and that sort of stuff, then you can do that too. Now, not only did they add this passive skill tree, but they also made the progression into higher time marks much more streamlined and much easier. So you know how you used to have to progress the watcher of each specific time mark? Well, now you don't actually have to do that anymore. Rather, what you have to do is you kill time mark 1 in Glacial Abyss, time mark 2 in lava, time mark 3 in Steelforge, and so on and so forth. And that's how you'll be progressing through your Netherrealm, essentially meaning that you'll be much quicker to reach time mark 7. And overall, you won't have that sort of weird situation where some of them will be at lower time marks because you haven't actually progressed that specific zone. Rather, you'll just be like set out to, oh yeah, I have to kill the watcher of this zone in this time mark, and you'll be able to progress. And you can see that in this graphic here. So you see that you have to defeat the watcher in this time mark, but then you can go all the way to 7 and then this time mark. But it does seem that you'll have to defeat every watcher at time mark 7 at some point. So yeah, at some point in your progression, you'll go through and kill the watcher in every single one of the zones, as it is kind of displayed over here. But that's a really good change. I think overall it's going to make progression much smoother, and it's going to feel much nicer to progress through that. So overall, that is pretty much really all there is to say right now. Now, I feel like this video was kind of already a little bit overwhelming. There's so much information there to absorb. And if you want to know more about the season, yeah, like you can go through here and read the patch notes in depth. Now, there's really a lot here, and they're just like showing you every change that they made to the game this season. So if you're crazy enough to go through and read through it all, by all means. But yeah, I think, Torchlight Infinite is like it's getting to the point where like the game is pretty sick. I've had a lot of people that were sort of on the fence about trying the game, but once they've tried it, ARPG enjoyers, they kind of love it. And honestly, so do I. I think the game is really good. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, I'll be playing the game on the 5th when it is launched. On the new season, Clockwork Ballet, it is going to be launched on this Friday, actually, pretty early in the morning here in EU, but depending on where you are, better check the time. It's on their Twitter. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed my little sort of like rundown. Sorry about that. My little rundown, talking through the notes and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. Hope you have a good night. Cheers.